Thanks for watching. I'm John Razimus. In this episode of Occult Unmasked, I'm going to talk about why I believe Roger Morneau's story is true. Part 2 of the book review I am editing right now. It's going to come up very shortly. I just want to interject and tell you why I believe his story has credibility. I can vouch for a part of Roger's story. Roger claimed he had poltergeist experiences after he left the demon worship organization. This was in 1946. The poltergeist phenomena is real. I was ignorant of it until it happened to me in the year 2011. 1,000 years before Roger was born, poltergeist phenomena existed. And in 2011, after Roger passed away, it happened to me. Roger passed away in the year 1998. Shortly after his last recorded interview. I've watched every single Roger Morneau video on YouTube that I could find. And I've read both versions of his main story, which is the recruited into the demon worship organization and leaving story. And somewhere in those videos, and perhaps even in one of these books, he mentioned 6 months of poltergeist haunting after leaving. I've tried to track it down, I can't find it, but trust me, he did mention somewhere. Maybe someone can find it, or I'll probably come across it. 6 months, specifically, of poltergeist activity, of demon poltergeist harassment, took place after Roger left that organization.
And he said, no problem with the spirits at all, huh? Oh, the spirits, well, yeah, they're trying to open communication with me all the time. You knock every night, they wake me up.
I didn't ever join anything like that, but in the year 2011, I also experienced 6 months of poltergeist activity. I wasn't under the same stresses or the same circumstances as Roger. Completely different circumstances. I had a good job, I was kicking back, and I noticed after a few weeks that, hey, this is a very actively haunted by a poltergeist entity room. I lived with the thing for 6 months. That 6-month timetable, that time frame, I believe, is some type of unknown secret law of the universe. I didn't know during the 6 months how long it would last. Let's focus on 6 months for me, 6 months for Roger. That's one similarity we have. That's similarity number 1.
The garage door started to open. That garage door is probably 40 years old, and it's one of those rollers up and down with the big springs. It opened 2 or 3 times. I paid no attention to that. I thought of the spirits right away. I was going up the staircase. I heard it rolling up and then rolling down. When I started to write, the door started to roll up and down. Every 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes, the door would roll up and down. And it would hit concrete, man, and make an awful noise. All that night, that door must have opened 50 times. And the next night, the exact same thing. And it went every night that I wrote that manuscript.
Roger did receive and have a few instances here and there of residual poltergeist activity. Nothing as extreme as the 6 months, but residually here and there, especially when he was writing his books. His garage door would open and close, and just tiny things. Well, residually, it has happened to me as well. So you can check that off as 2 things that I have in common with Roger's poltergeist story.
And I felt like telling the spirits, buzz off. But I had understood that I would not, again, talk with spirits. I had made up my mind on that. Don't speak to the spirits. Ignore them completely.
But even within the story itself, Roger said he didn't want to communicate with it. He had zero desire to communicate with the spirits. That was the number one thought that went through my mind during the 6 months of harassment. I don't want to even acknowledge this thing exists, let alone talk to it. I do not want to talk to it. No communication. That was literally the strongest thought in my head, and it wasn't coming from an outside source. That was internally, I was like, whoa. See, from an outside perspective, from someone that doesn't even believe or know poltergeists exist, it's a cartoon Twilight Zone episode, and sure, they would record it, they'd have fun with it, they become best friends with it, and perhaps in some bizarre scenarios, magicians notice the poltergeist knocking stuff over in their room, and this is going to be an extremely rare scenario because these things don't appear, they don't show up very often. It's an extremely, extremely rare scenario. Even Roger's friend told him, "You met the spirit counselor talked to you? What a great honor." He doesn't even talk to members of this demon worship organization after they worship the spirits for many years. The fact that it showed up is a great honor. You're going to be rich and famous. Come back and join. I'll smooth things over with the priest. And Roger said no, and he was out and not wanting to communicate. Roger did communicate. He eventually said, "Okay, spirit, what do you want?" Because he was curious. He thought maybe there was a message that could help him at least understand what was going on. And the spirit was able to talk. Now, I didn't ever say, "Okay, spirit, what do you want?" I never said that once, ever. So, I can say it was restrained from being able to talk.
And the light that was on the table moved and stayed in midair. It stays there. See?
Were you feeling afraid at this time?
Oh, no, not at all. No.
No,
No, because of the fact that, you see, human beings get accustomed to a lot of things. There's something interesting about the human mind. You can adjust to an awful lot of stuff. You can adjust to a lot of things that would terrify you to begin with. After a while, they become common and ordinary.
During the 6 months when I was experiencing poltergeist activity, the exact same thought crossed my mind. I thought something to the effect of, wow, I'm surprised I'm not scared of this invisible demon spirit that is constantly knocking over stuff in my room trying to keep me awake at night. This thing would knock over stuff constantly. I commanded it to leave, it would come back, it would knock more stuff over, it would play around, walk around, sit on everything, knock all night long, knock over objects, bottles of water, step on bags, sit on pillows, sit on every surface in the room, especially surfaces that would creak. It loved making a creaking sound, and it would just play with the pencils, knock over the pencils, especially a corner. It loved the corner. It entered the room from the corner every single time, usually around 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m., but it lasted all night. I think I even measured it once. It would pretty much leave around 5:30 a.m., 5 a.m., somewhere around there it would leave. So there was a time frame that it was conducive to the room. It did definitely prefer the nighttime. I worked from 9 to 5, so I got home around 5:15, 5:30, and he was there. From 5:30 p.m. to 5:30 a.m., a good 12-hour window, it was there. I never communicated with the thing, ever. Except for a rare few times, and it really wasn't even talking to it. It was more like talking out loud. But week 1, I was freaked out and couldn't sleep. By the end of the first month, I was so used to the entity, I was complaining that it wasn't paying rent in a joking manner. Going from dreadful fear to making jokes about the situation was something I didn't expect would happen. And that mindset, that thought, only went through my mind because I experienced a poltergeist entity firsthand. When I hear Roger Morneau having the same mindset of don't communicate with it, him losing fear and being amazed that the human mind can adjust to such a situation, those are two mindsets two thoughts that crossed my mind while I witnessed a poltergeist entity firsthand. That's why I believe Roger actually experienced it, because he had similar thoughts that I had exactly during the harassment of the poltergeist entity, which harassed me for 6 months. Roger's spirit poltergeist was able to pick up a table lamp and move a painting from one side of the wall to the other. Mine never levitated objects, especially big objects. If it levitated anything, like I said, a tiny screw in a drawer in my tower computer, I believe, was picked up and dropped. And I heard that in pitch blackness while I was trying to sleep. And that was in between other ruckuses, other things moving around, other knocks and bangs. The thing was particularly playful that night and played with multiple things in my room. To just give a really vague description or summarize, some people say, oh, how do you know it wasn't your imagination? Or how do you know it wasn't this or that? How do you know it's an independent entity? Literally, the first thing you notice, at least with the 6-month entity, is it has the gist of you lay down and it sounds like someone just walked into your room, and that person is going in circles, and that person is playing with everything in your room, just going in circles, just playing with you. It almost had the personality of, let's say, a buddy that wants to wake you up really badly from a movie. Like, they're just knocking over everything. Let's go to the party, come on. And it just knocks over everything. It just really wanted to get my attention. Perhaps it did want me to talk to it and communicate with it. My number one thought was, do not communicate. I had the thought, maybe I should film it, but I realized quickly, because I really thought about it, this thing was actually happening in front of me. I thought, if I record it, what am I going to do? Put a bottle on a table and say, hey, can you knock that bottle over for me? I didn't want to open any communication. It's a dreadful, fearful type situation. It's not a cartoon. It's not a Twilight Zone episode. It actually happened. The thing sat and everything in my room. Roger doesn't really go into great detail on the poltergeist. And on one of his interviews, he even skips it. When he's in front of a bunch of people with kids, he skips the poltergeist story because he was too freaky, and he realized he was too freaky, so he skipped it.
Get some rest from these spirits. And I went to sleep. And it woke me up about 2 o'clock in the morning again, and at 4 o'clock. Now, at 4 o'clock in the morning there, I sat up in bed, pushed my pillow in the back, and I said to myself, what in the world am I going to do? Because the Lord doesn't clear them out from me. Do not speak to demon spirits, even if it is to command them to depart in the name of the Lord Jesus, like I have done it before I was knowledgeable.
Roger said that he commanded it to leave multiple times. I have to admit, and I don't think I've even mentioned it too many times, if ever, but on camera, but I did command it to leave my poltergeist entity, and it would always come back. Roger commanded it to leave, it always came back. That's a tiny detail that a sci-fi writer is not going to put in their book, that a fantasy writer is not going to write down. The entity had authority to be in my room. Roger said the entity had authority to be in his room. Even thinking about the authority situation and some type of rank system and the principality system, all of these things went through my head. I do believe there are principalities, which is an old-fashioned term for a piece of land, a lot of land owned or ran by a prince. So I think some entities are literally assigned to a piece of land, which is why I think stories of that forest demon, or that field demon, or that stream and water demon, perhaps they're assigned to that actual piece of land, and I think there's other entities that are assigned to you from birth. But I do believe in a lot of Buddhist concepts, perhaps the Bardo realms of Buddhism, I see them as different dimensions, different entities being in those dimensions. The white-robed, pure entities at the top, and the black-robed, dark entities at the bottom. These dark entities are demons, in my opinion, and they can't see us because we're below them. They look down and they can see us. Roger actually had first-hand experience with a poltergeist entity. In 2011, I had first-hand experience with a poltergeist entity. The first time I had experience with a poltergeist entity was in 2010. But it was very brief concerning the poltergeist aspect. But he was a high-ranking negative entity. Roger referred to these as spirit counselors that had many spirits under their command. A legion of spirits, or however many legions. These are abstract biblical terms until you meet them face to face, and then it's real. As far as some red flags, some red herrings that pop up in Roger's story, I can't vouch for them, but because I know the poltergeist story is true, I tend to believe him being recruited into an organization is true. Now, how is it possible that this priest guy, who was bald, by the way, the high priest of the demon worship organization, Roger said was bald. Very much like Anton LaVey, very much like the later years of Aleister Crowley. Perhaps the devil likes his followers to shave their head, or at least his really devout devil monks to shave their heads. But that's a fashion statement they all seem to follow, the really, really devout ones. But how is it possible that this high priest of the demon worship place said, hey, by the way, the Adventists, they are the only ones protected by our secret devices because they worship on Saturday. The Seventh-day Adventists is who he was talking about, obviously. And Roger's like, I'd never heard of them. Okay, whatever. It's too big of a red flag. It sounds like an advertisement interjected into a very, very bizarre story, which many people think is real or hope is real, because it's like the Roger being recruited into an actual Luciferian organization that isn't just rich people getting together committing sins for fun, like in the movie The Ninth Gate or the movie Eyes Wide Shut. There's no actual demons that manifest. There's no actual demon powers shown in those movies. Those movies show rich people getting together, splurging and gorging themselves on their lusts. Roger said this organization focused on actually communicating, actually worshiping demons, and those demons actually, virtually immediately, helping the followers. Roger was given a gift. Here are some gifts. Which one do you choose? Roger chose clairvoyance, to see the future. At least 3 days into the future, and he wanted to focus on the horse races. He won the horse races 100% of the time. After he had the vision, the dream, he went into a trance-like state, and he saw, in a movie, projected into his mind, the winning horse, the winning numbers, the location, the time. He saw the race in his head. And the winner is number 13, Fasty. Whatever the case may be, he saw it in his head. After researching many occult books, I've come across enough stories on being able to see the future via magic, via the occult, to know that a trance-like state and seeing a movie is exactly how it's done. Nostradamus, seeing the future, he would scry into a bowl of water. A movie wouldn't project itself onto the bowl of water. So if someone else walked in the room, they wouldn't see the movie in the bowl of water. The movie was actually projected into Nostradamus' head. People will say Nostradamus was a good, holy man. I could tell you, scrying into a bowl of water is an occult ritual. Whether he was a good guy or a bad guy, I guess it's up to you to judge. But that is one of the ancient scrying methods where you see a movie projected into your head. For example, fortune readers that put tarot cards out, or a bag of bones, or whatever the case may be, if the fortune teller can actually see the future, and they're not a fraud, which is rare, because I'm sure many a times they're a fraud, but if they're legit, if they can actually see the future, a movie is projected into their mind, and they're really not looking at the cards or the bones or the crystal ball, for example. There's a lady on YouTube that gives how to scry in a crystal ball, and I think she was telling the truth. She said, you get in a meditative state, you get in a trance-like state, you stare at the ball until you see a movie. And yes, the movie will project itself on the ball, but if someone else walked in the room, they wouldn't see the movie projected on the ball. It's in the head of the person that is in the trance-like state. When you're out of the trance-like state, you can't see it. When you're in the trance-like state, you can see it if the demonic entities want you to see it. She said she sees a movie, and it just starts playing, and you just kick back and you watch it. It's that simple. So there are many examples of occultists, witches, fortune tellers that are actually able to see the future and scry.
And sure enough, one night whether I fell into a trance or dreamed the thing, I don't know exactly what happened, but I saw 3 races that were really going to pay big. One horse paid 21-1 because he was that poor, right? The chance of winning was so poor that he paid 21-1 on him. And it showed me I saw the board, the bouquet, and the number on it. And I went there, and they said it was going to be on Saturday. That was like on Wednesday. A few days later, it was Saturday. I went there, and sure enough, there they were on the boards. I went to the wicket and handed some money and got myself a winner. Now I said, well, I'm a little crazy. I ought to put more money on there, so I put $20 onto the next horse, and that paid 21-1. So you know, I left there with maybe $400 or $500 in my hands, and I started to do that. In this case, I went directly down to the finest men's shop on St. Catherine Street and bought myself a $200 suit. And I said, well, you know, it'd be mighty nice if I had the gift of clairvoyance, where I could see, you know,
clairvoyance,
see at the bouquets, you know, you play the horses, you go to the bouquets, and you see all the name of the horses and the tracks, Belmont, or whatever they're running, you see, and to know which was going to be the winner. I said, that'd be great. I could make myself nice money. He said,
that would probably work with the stock market too, then.
Yeah, it would probably work with anything, you know. But he said, that's yours. You got it. And sure enough, just a little bit later, I had a dream. And I dreamed that I went to the bookie and on a Saturday morning, and I saw like a calendar date and everything, and I saw all the horses running at 3 different races, and the winner was the one that shone.
It was shiny.
Shiny. Mm-hmm. And that was one there. He was 21-1. This horse. It was so bad, you know, the possibility of winning was so poor that he was paying 21-1. In other words, if you put $1 down, you get 21, see, if he wins. Well, that was a shining one.
And they describe it exactly like Roger described it with his horse racing technique. And he didn't read occult books on how to scry, how to see the future. He was given that gift because he kneeled down, did the incense, and worshipped demon spirits. There are a lot of books which talk about demonolatry, idolatry towards demons. And people can worship them for 100 years straight and not get the gifts Roger got within days. Because he went straight to the source. He was a member of the extreme elite organization which not only worshipped the devil, but they were able to get the gifts immediately, even communicate with the high-ranking demons. And the leader of the building in Montreal was able to see the devil. Now, as far as what the leader told Roger, I personally believe he twisted information into Roger's ear. He told Roger what he wanted to hear and needed to hear. The same spirit that gave Roger the winning horses through the trance-like vision, through that gift of clairvoyance that he was promised and he was given thanks to worshiping the demon spirits. the same entities that gave him that perhaps went to the high priest and said, hey, in a week he's going to join the Seventh-day Adventists. And I bet that high priest leader was like, hey, no one has left, and the last guy that left, we killed him. We can't exactly get this secret out. It's kind of the most super secret elite organization on planet Earth or in Canada. Perhaps there are many branches around the world. I would say there's probably few branches because I've never heard of this organization in my life. And I've researched secret societies for a while. I've been looking for some secret societies in Los Angeles. I've been looking around. I've heard a few vague stories. Nothing as extreme. I don't think anyone's heard any stories as extreme as Roger's. It really sticks out as almost too good to be true. But Roger claims the high priest, which looked like Anton LaVey, he turned to Roger and said, hey, we can do anything. We can kill you if you try to leave. The last guy died in a fire. We killed him. We have a hypnotist that can hypnotize you and brainwash you and make you do whatever we want. But there's one group that can't be deceived. There's one group we can't touch. The Adventists that worship on Saturday, the true Sabbath. Oh my gosh. So he said, oh, by the way, the Seventh-day Adventists, he used just the word Adventist, according to Roger, not Seventh Day. But it sounded exactly like an evil villain in a Scooby-Doo cartoon, revealing the super secret to the brand new recruit that just walked in the building. It's too much of a setup. Roger didn't realize it was a setup. The guy that interviewed Roger didn't realize it was a setup. The second guy that interviewed Roger didn't realize it was a setup. The people who edited this book didn't realize it was a setup because they're all Seventh-day Adventists. So it sounded good to them. Like, yeah. Well, I'm not a Seventh-day Adventist, and all non-Seventh-day Adventists, they see that as a huge red flag. The Seventh-day Adventists did help Roger and they did protect him. Therefore, he assumed the words of that demon priest must have been true. I think Roger was protected because of his faith and because he did want to change his life. He was genuinely honest about that. He wasn't trying to just deathbed confession, just leave and party. He actually wanted to turn his life over to God and be a good person. And I think that's why he was protected. I think if Roger joined many different organizations, many different groups, he would have been protected as long as he had that faith in a higher power. That's my personal opinion, but I think that Adventist information fed to him by the high priest was fed to the high priest by demon spirits that could see the future. If you accept the trance-like state and Roger winning at the horse races and buying the suit that he bought with the money that he got from the horse races, if you believe that story, then you should also accept the possibility that the demon spirits saw the future and knew that Roger was going to leave. Here is the suit that Roger wore that he bought for like $350 or something like that, right after he won at the horse races for the first time. He had a pocket full of cash. The first thing he bought was this suit, this gray suit. And Roger was so ticked off against the demon spirits, and also he probably didn't have much money, that almost as a sign of, I'm with God now, but I'm going to keep the suit. Almost as a sign of defiance, but it was really probably because it was the best suit he had and he wanted to wear it. He wore this very same suit on his wedding day. So check that out. The very same suit on his wedding day is that suit he purchased with demon horse racing money. I think his story is true. I think he was fed information. Now, I should preface with this entire video, I should have put this at the beginning. If you're watching this video, you should already be familiar with the Roger Morneau story. There are 3 key videos on YouTube. Roger Morneau, A Trip into the Supernatural, the original full testimony, and then his 1998 video, shortly before he died, Part 1 and Part 2. And you could find those on Seventh-day Adventist YouTube channels, and non. People copied it hundreds of times. It's a fascinating story. This is my summary. Part 2 of the book review, coming very soon. I had to mention this part. I had to mention this just to really give you a reason why I'm even mentioning Roger. His books, even though they are Christian Seventh-day books, they are as occult as some of these old occult books because they mention an actual organization that worshipped the devil. Scary stuff, really freaky. Stay tuned. More videos are coming soon. I thank you for watching. This has been John Razimus. Be seeing you.